When somebody asks me how much money do you need to retire, it's really an interesting question because everybody's situation is different, but there are some similarities. You know, Usually savings and investments fund what Social Security or pensions or rental real estate income doesn't cover. So people have income streams, and then we look at what the deficit is and how much money you need to pay out of your savings and investments to make sure you have a comfortable retirement. What is it used for? The same things before you retire. It pays for housing, for transportation, for food, for clothing, for travel, for gifting, for all sorts of insurances. And so it's the same budget. It doesn't really change. And many people need 80, 90, or even 100% of their pre-retirement budget to have income streams or savings and investment. The most common expense that a retiree can ignore or forget to budget for would be end-of-life expenses like caregivers coming to your house, going to assisted living or skilled nursing. Those are very expensive parts of people's lives. And a lot of times that can eat up quite a bit of savings if it goes on for an extended period of time. So that's probably the number one thing that they fail to budget for. Secondly, it's the emergencies that might come up. It could be the roof repair, could be the extensive dental work, could be the transmission falling out of your car, or what seems to be more frequent is kids and grandkids needing money in an emergency, and that tends to be a large amount sometimes. The future retirees reducing their annual expenses, it comes in a couple of areas. It usually is in transportation. They're not driving to work every day. Also, they're not buying expensive clothes that they have to wear for work. How do you calculate a rough retirement savings target? Well, first of all, you have to look at the reliable income streams coming in, see what the deficit is, say at 100% of your budget or 80% of your budget, whatever you want to use as your target, and then figure out how much you would need if you drew it out at 3% a year, 4% a year, or even 5% a year for 30 years. And that is a good rule of thumb. In the mid-1990s, a gentleman named William Benkin came up with the 4% safe withdrawal rate. And a lot of times there are articles these days, is the 4% rule still effective? And Morningstar came up with a report a year or so ago saying it really should be 3.3%. And then Mr. Bengen came up with a counter commentary and said, that safe withdrawal rate was the worst starting retirement in the worst year possible, which was 1966 during his initial study. And most people could take out a 5% withdrawal rate for 30 years and still wouldn't run out of money. So the 4% rule is not obsolete, and most planners will use that. But if they do their own research, they can sometimes say, well, gee, you could use 5 or 6%, especially if someone's life expectancy isn't that long. And what are the recommended rules of thumb that you might suggest on how much savings they have? Again, it all depends, but 25 to 30 years worth of savings that you wouldn't entirely exhaust because you want to have some sort of margin at the end for people that possibly live longer. And anything else that might be an important piece of advice, plan ahead and check on it. Check your numbers, whether it's a advisor or some website that lets you calculate this by yourself. But it's dangerous when you're 75 and realize you're running out of money and you have to move in with a younger sibling or something. So if you want to stay independent, you do your homework ahead of time and you think about all those things that could happen. And if they don't, you're a lucky person and your kids and grandkids can have a nice gift that you leave behind. Thank you. I hope this helps. And I hope the reporter who gets this can use some of what I say.